What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and today I'm doing one of my yearly reviews, and today I am looking at PFL Europe. There was 4 pretty good cards this year in PFL Europe. I'm going to go through each of those cards and maybe just pick out 1 or 2 things, and I'm running you through kind of maybe the results. But what I want to do mostly today is discuss, say, what PFL Europe is, how it worked, and maybe what it'll look like in the future as well. And I want to start by giving my review of the season. I'll do that, I think, for all of the promotions, and this might be my first one, might be my second one out. I'm going to do a lot of them this holiday season, so if this is the first one out, they're all going to look relative and sound relatively similar to this, but for the different promotions. Although PFL Europe might be a little bit different because it is new, and I think it could change, and naturally will change because of the tournament format anyway, but we will talk about that in due course. First things first, what was my review of the season? How did I think the season went? Did I like it? Did I not like it? And I'll be honest, I was skeptical coming in. When I heard they're going doing, a tournament in Europe, I thought, like, there's some very good European fighters. There's also some very good European fighters signed to other places like Cage Warriors, KSW, Octagon, all of those places. And I thought, okay, you could put on European fights, well, in Ireland or in the UK or in Paris or in Roma or wherever it might be, and put on good cards. But will you be able to put on good tournaments? I was very, very, very skeptical of that before the tournaments were announced, in terms of the people that were in it. I suppose after the tournaments are announced, but before the rosters were announced. And I really wasn't sure if they'd be able to do it, especially for some of the weight classes they had. Now, you could argue maybe the Decheva weight class, let's put it like that, maybe they didn't succeed in that, which is fair enough. But, we see at the world level, it's very tough to succeed as well, especially when you have someone as dominant as Dakota Decheva or Kale Harrison for the last few years. Luckily, Larissa Pacheco showed up there. But that's deviating from the point for a second. The other tournaments that they put on, the other seasons that they put on, were fantastic. They were really, really, really good. And if you go back and watch one of my previews before episode 1 of season 1, or date 1 of season 1, I said that too. Because the second the rosters were announced, I don't think there was a lot of excitement, right? I think there was some good excitement in Ireland because you had some of the very good Irish fighters on it. You had Dylan Duke, you had Franz Malambo, you had John Mitchell, and a couple more as well. So I think for Ireland it was pretty good. But for the rest of the world and maybe the rest of Europe, maybe people were thinking, okay, we'll wait and see on this. And I was kind of the same, maybe a little bit. But then I did my research, and I went through some of the fighters, and some of the gems they had in this league season were fantastic. They were really good. They had some really good fighters. I'm not sure if it was, our guy Greg Savage, or if it was Dan Hardy, or if it was a combination of a lot of different people. But whoever deserves the credit absolutely earned it, because they got some really, really, really good fighters for these tournaments in a place where it's not always that easy, as I mentioned. A lot of these fighters are signed up. A lot of fighters are hard to get. I put out a tweet the other day saying, name your top 5 unsigned Irish fighters. And a lot of them were either amateurs or people who maybe have 1 or 2 fights into their career. People are getting snapped up. People are getting signed left, right, and center. Now, this was a little bit different, obviously, because of the Bellator PFL thing and stuff, and a few people maybe not in Bellator, and that's another discussion maybe for next year as well. Maybe if it'll look a little bit different, but they did a great job. They did an absolutely fantastic job, and it might be worth just looking at the rosters before we get into the cards and before we get into talking about a few of the fighters. So at bantamweight, Ali Taleb, there's Farbat, Nizad, Francesco Nuzzi, Franz Malambo, Kenji Bartoluzzi, Kurshid Kakarov, Mokhtar Benashi, and Rashid Haz. Light heavyweight, they had El Rami, Salamoni, Ladero, Jacob Nido. They had Privilescu, Amine Kozliga, and Simeon Powell. At lightweight, they started off with Duque, Alex Shivas, Connor Hughes, Dylan Tuke, John Mitchell, Radu Maxim, Jacob Kusuba, and Jassim Darush. And then in the women's flyweight division, Dakota Decheva and a few others as well. Skatizi, Vishlak, Hermansen, Cubero, Holm, Ekut, and Lizzie Jevers as well. I would say that out of those fighters, right, I knew Decheva was a very good prospect. I knew the Irish people were very good prospects, John Mitchell, Franz Malambo, and others. But when I watched the tape and I saw, and I knew Simeon Powell was a good prospect as well, but I watched the tape and I saw Newsy, I saw Ali Taleb, I saw Kakurov, I saw Benassi, I saw Jacob Indo, I saw Alex Shivas, I saw Jacob Kasuba. Maybe I said him twice. I was like, they're after unearthing here, or maybe not unearthing, maybe is the wrong word. I'm sure a lot of people knew about him, but they're after signing some real top prospects here. And that is a thing that if they can continue to do that, this is not only going to make PFL Europe really good going forward, it's also going to make the seasons proper really good as we go forward. Because the winner of these seasons, the PFL European seasons, are going to be really live dogs, or not even dogs in some cases, for the PFL global seasons. I truly believe that. And we will talk about some of them here in a second as we go through it, because the performances they put on this year there's especially, two of the winners stick out an awful lot to me, but there's a few other people as well. And we will talk about them after we look at the events. So let's start on PFL Europe 1, which went down in the Virtu Motors Arena in Newcastle in the north of England, and that was on March 25th was their first card. So March 25th, their first card, their final card went down here in Dublin on December the 8th. They put out their big guns here for the English market right at the top. And do you know what I like as well about PFL Europe and what they did very well this year? They did two things. They gave big spots, and they weren't afraid to give big spots to the people in the tournaments or in the season. I call them tournament. I know PFL and I like to call them seasons, and I try to respect that. I try to call them seasons, but tournament just comes down to me sometimes, right? But they also gave, say, like Nathan Kelly in Dublin, they gave some of their other really good up-and-comers a spotlight to fight, and on some of the undercards as well, in these cards, they did the same. And I like that. I like the fact that, going forward, PFL is going to have a lot more fighters because of the Bellator merger, and I think PFL Europe, PFL proper, the Challenger Series may be a little bit different, but I think there needs to be more non-season fights. There needs to be more showcase fights, and needs to be more big fights. There's no problem putting them together. There's no problem, mixing them. I don't think people will get confused, and you can, there's plenty of easy ways to have people not confused. Just explain it to them as the card is going on. But I think that's important, and I think they did do that. They did that, in my opinion, almost better in PFL Europe because it was a shorter season than in the PFL proper. There's another point as well. We'll talk about that afterwards. I saw a lot of people talking about how they preferred the format of the PFL Europe to the PFL Global. We'll talk about that in a second. But on this first card, it started exactly how you would want it for PFL. Simeon Powell got a good round and a half against Mohamed Amineh. Ended up getting the finish there. Dakota Decheva also ended up getting the finish. So you're talking about your two top prospects there, and they both got finished and they both looked good. Another guy who was in a showcase, who PFL had signed, Lewis McGillen-Evans, he also got a finish. And then there was the light heavyweights and the female flyweights as well got underway, and you had Jacob Indom, who we'll talk a lot more about in a few minutes, emerged with a very impressive win in 48 seconds, which was a sign of things to come. Anthony Salomone, a guy who I'd known for a while, he'd fought Ireland's Will Fleury a while back, and he's a good, solid fighter, has fought some really good people, and another good test I was thinking for Simeon Powell or for whoever the next prospect coming through at light heavyweight would be. The women's flyweight scene, we had Skitisi winning against Jeevers. That was a good win for her, split decision. We split decision for Cornelia Holm as well there. And then in the last of the light heavyweight division fights, we had El Rami getting a win there, and then a few undercard fights as well on that one. The second event of the year was in July. It was over in Berlin. And it was a good spread. So you had Newcastle, you had Berlin, you had Paris, and then you had Dublin. So absolutely perfect. That's showing like a genuine PFL European series. Like they could easily have done a PFL European series and done, started off in Dublin, did one in Newcastle, did one in London maybe, and then did another one in Dublin. They could have done that, but no, they didn't. They spread it around, and I think that's really, really smart. In the second night of fights, they had Francesco Nuzzi at bantamweight get in there and get a quick finish as well over Farbod Nezad. And Nuzzi, he was one of those guys who looked like the top prospect at the very start, 10-1, and he really showed it there. And when you have the bantamweights, you have the lightweights, I think it's a little bit not of a cheat code maybe for a good tournament, because there are a lot of good fighters in those tournaments and in those weight classes. But as I said earlier, it's not that easy when everyone's signing them up. So as I said, they did a good job here. Standout fight probably in the first two or the stand-up performance, I think, in the first two nights was Ali Taleb for me. He looked absolutely fantastic. He went in there and he beat Kenji Bataluzzi. Really, really, really took my breath away. I'd watched him before this, obviously, to preview the card, and I knew he was good, but, he looked fantastic here. But that night as well was a real cool night for the bantamweight division, because you had Kakarov looking very good as well. Franz Malambo won a split decision over a guy who missed weight, and it was kind of odd, because when it misses weight and it's the tournaments and all of that, it's we get kind of caught up in how many points you're going to get and all of that. But Franz was the name coming into that, and when Franz won, and everyone was thinking like, okay, this could be the guy in the finale in Dublin, I want that fight. I think that added another little bit to it in that bantamweight division. So we had, the four bantamweights I suppose you would want winning in Nuzzi, Kakarov, Malambo and Ali Taleb all winning, and that's exactly what you want if you're a PFL, because they all go on and it's a dog-eat-dog after that date. In the lightweight division, I think the same could probably be said. There was a draw though, which is always tough. Shivas was one of the favourites coming in. I think he drew with a Son Duke. John Mitchell got a really good win, as did Dylan Chuk in a bit of an upset, I think, in that one. But Kizuba came through also with a win there, and I think that was kind of the main lot for them as well. I know Radu Maxim was a good prospect coming through, but when you put him in there with Kizuba, it's going to be tough. And Lewis McGill-Evans also got another win on that. So Lewis McGill-Evans was he on the third card? Was he on the third card? No, he wasn't. But he fought in 3 of the 4 PFL Europe cards this year. So no one did more than Lewis McGill-Evans this year. The third card was in Paris, as I said, on September the 30th, and this was the one which is probably what put PFL Europe on the map more than anything else. And a lot of that had to do with the main event of Cedric Doumbé and Kylian Mbappe sitting in the front row now. Maybe some people are tuning into this and you're from different parts of the world. Maybe you don't know, who Kylian Mbappe is or how important he is or anything like that. Like, just to put it this way, he's probably, I would describe him maybe as would you call him the Patrick Mahomes of association football? You wouldn't, like, he's not, if say Tom Brady and Peyton Manning were like the Ronaldo and the Messi, like he's the new kid on the block. No, I think he's a tad bit overrated, but still, most people would disagree with me on that, but that's what he is. He is, some people would say, the best footballer in the world right now. If not, most people would say top 2 with Erling Haaland. I'd put him a little bit further down. I'd have, I won't say who I'd have, because I've one of them plays for Liverpool and I don't want to say that. But he's right up there. But he's really unbelievably famous, massive in France after winning the World Cup with them and getting to the final the last time out as well. Just a huge star. For him to be there, roaring on Cedric Doumbé from the sideline, that makes you a superstar. immediately. I'm sure this was on French news and websites and stuff all over the world, and Doumbé, we already knew he was this unbelievable kickboxer. We had all the chat about him going to the UFC, and then when PFL signed him, everyone was like, oh wow, this is a massive signing for them. But then for Kylian Mbappe to show up and sit cage side for his fight, and then for him to get a 9-second knockout against Jordan Zebo, who I did the preview for this card, and that Jordan Zebo is a good fighter. He is a good fighter. I saw a few people afterwards saying, they put him in there against, a warm body, basically. That's not the case at all. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Zebo went on and had a good career. That guy is a good fighter. So, massive night for PFL with Cedric Doumbé and the headliner. The other, and that was a showcase fight. Like the Lazy King, Abdul Abdurrahimov, he went in and got the first round finish as well. So, exactly what you want. And we will talk about the two of them maybe at the end, and looking ahead to next year, we will talk about them again. There was more light heavyweights and women's flyweights on this card. Jacobin Do, Simeon Powell got their wins. Dacheva got her win. And in the other divisions, there was a lightweight fight. Kashun got a win, who was one of the standouts at the start. Kakarov beat Ali Taleb. In my opinion, this was the fight of the tournament. This was the highest level fight, including the finales or anything like that. I think these two guys were the two best guys in the tournament. And now that might be a little bit unfair on Franz Malambo because he was beating Kakarov in that fight, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think Ali Taleb is a fantastic fighter. And for Khurshid Kakarov to go in there and beat him the way he did and go on to do what he did in the next fight, which we'll talk about in a second, I think it warrants him being called, if not the best emerging prospect of this year, I think he should be right up there. Like, there's other people, like I was actually doing a bit of debate on this today. It depends what you refer to as an emerging prospect, right? So, say someone like Ian Gary. He started off the year, and now I'm recording this just before Ian Gary fights Vicente Luque, so maybe that has changed, but even still, he started off the year unranked with a fight against Kenan Song on the horizon. He beat him. Who else did he fight? He beat Neil Magny. There was supposed to be a Jeff Neal fight and all of that. And he's in, towards the top now. Let's say he beats Luque. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he lost him. But even if win or lose, emerged as a prospect into the rankings. But if you say maybe Ian Gary's ranked now, he's not an emerging prospect anymore, there aren't many guys who've had a better year than Khurshid Kakarov outside of that. Honestly, I think this guy is the real deal and an emerging star for PFL. We'll talk more about that in a second. Franz Malambo also won here. Kazuba won here. John Mitchell won here. And they also had Chanel Dyer in the showcase, who I think will be looking ahead to next year with her as well. So the perfect... I think, maybe they would have liked Dylan Chuk in the finale instead of Kazuba, but Kazuba's very good as well. I'm sure they would have been happy with Mokhtar Benassi as well if he was there, but that was the way it happened. And then we went to the finale in Dublin a couple of weeks ago, which I obviously attended. There was a bit of talk about who should be the main event. It ended up being a showcase fight with Nathan Kelly against Dimitri Solmis, and I think they made the right decision, to be honest. He is... a dub. He is obviously a very good ticket seller, and the crowd reaction when he came out was fantastic. Plus, and I know this for a fact, PFL really rate him highly. When I was talking to PFL, I spoke to them at the start, and a couple of the matchmakers, and they were kind of saying to me, who is the guy we should be looking at? And I named a few different guys, from a few different gyms, and they're, Nathan Kelly was probably one of them I named. And I think he definitely was, but the one that they said back to me was Nathan Kelly. The one that they said, this is the guy who who we think is going to be the guy. This is the guy who a lot of people like. It was Nathan Kelly. So I wasn't at all surprised to see him in that spot. When I was surprised to see the absolute manic reception he got from the 5,000 people there, and surprised in a good way. So very, very interesting that they did that. Like Doumbé beforehand, he went out and he won. Brilliant. It was exactly perfect for him. Now, the one issue in this card, I think, was the Irish didn't win a lot of fights. They sent them home happy because of Nathan Kelly, but Franz Malambo, John Mitchell, and the Irish trainer Valentina Shkatizi were all in finales and all lost, unfortunately, for the Irish crowd. And that was a bit of I suppose, a bit of a downer for the Irish crowd. But it's meritocracy. That's what PFL is all about. And that's what the PFL European tournament is about as well. And the best fighters won. And if you look at the 4 winners of the tournaments, it's very hard to say that wasn't the case. It's very hard to say that the standout fighters warrant the deserved winners. You know? Very, very hard. Kakarov, when you beat Franz Malamba as he did, when you beat Ali Taleb as he did, and the other fight before that he won, that I mentioned earlier, you deserve to be the PFL European champion. Unbelievable run. When you're Kazuba and you beat John Mitchell like that, you deserve it. Now, there was a bit of a weird stoppage or a bit of an almost stoppage in the first round, but he knocked him out with a body shot and punches after that. Brilliant. You know, when you're Decheva and you destroyed everyone, you deserve it. And when you're Jacques Bendo, you go in there and Simeon Powell is the guy. Everyone thinks Simeon Powell is going to win. He performs really well on all of these fights. He comes out and he hits you really hard, and then you finish him. You deserve to win it. So I think it was really good. It was what meritocracy should be. It's, if you love like meritocracy in MMA, this European series from PFL gave you exactly that. It was fantastic. Just as well, a couple of people I want to mention before that: Wesley Maya, Brett Johns, Tom Breeze, all impressed on that card, and young Nathan Kelly as well in the amateur fight. But the tournament itself, the season itself, from start to finish, what we had was high-level fighters. And what we produced at the end was 4 high-level champions. Like, if you were to tell me in a few years that Khurshid Kakarov went on to be a Bellator champion or a PFL champion or a UFC champion, I would not be one bit surprised. Not one bit surprised. Decheva, absolutely the same. Not one bit surprised at all. Now, at lightweight, for Katsuba, it's going to be a little bit harder, and a light heavyweight as well. Although Jacobin, I wouldn't be surprised either if he did. He's really good, you know. And I wouldn't be too surprised if Kazuba did either. But lightweight, bantamweight, very, very hard. And that just, to me, shows the quality of this, because these lads didn't just come through win a tournament. These lads came through, and lady came through and won a tough tournament with lots of tough fights and all tough finales. None of them had an easy finale. Maybe even Decheva, you know, aside, you know, Skitizi came out and she put it on her and she tried her best, but none of them had a tough tournament apart from her, you know, and that's absolutely fantastic. So all in all, the season, a glittering success. I think the last event as well, I wonder if PFL have ever sold as many tickets as they sold in Ireland for 5,000 people, even in the global ones, because I know they don't do that big of arenas and things like that, even for the finale. So that a glittering success for them, and surely coming back to Ireland maybe every year for the finale is the way to go. So let's talk about that future. I wonder what is going to be the future of PFL Europe. There's 2 ways I think they can go. They can go like they did in this season, where they sign, they go to SBG, they go to the big gyms in Germany, they go to the big gyms in London, up the north in England, in Spain, France, and other places, and they go, who's your best guy? Or they look and see who's the guy who's 7-0, 10-0, sign that person from Ireland, England, Wales, France, everywhere, and put them into tournament like this was. That's what this was. There's no doubt about that. And do you know what? I think that'd be really fun. Now, that's a very hard thing to do every year. That's a thing maybe you could do successfully maybe every 2 to 3 years. I think it's going to be very hard to do what they did here yearly, but they did it so well here, I would not doubt them. And if Dan Hardy is, let's say Dan Hardy is the guy who did it, and I spoke to Dan at the weekend and I complimented him on it, and he said he tunes into this show as well, so I'm delighted that he did that, and hello Dan if you're watching. It shows, you know, he's a pull for fighters as well. If you're a young up and coming fighter, and Dan Hardy's the guy who's like, I'm running this is your PFL Europe is my promotion, I'm the guy here, come and fight for me. I'm going to put you in tough fights against good guys. You're going to get a belt at the end of it. You're going to get $100,000 at the end of it. And then you're going to go on to fight for the $1 million. That's a very difficult thing to turn down. If you're a guy who's, do I go to Cage Warriors or do I go there? Well, in Cage Warriors, you might have to fight 5 fights before you get the title to maybe be signed for the UFC to get on 10-10. Here you win 3 fights and you've got 100 grand. You win 4 more fights next year and you have $1 million. So it's not the problem before, right? A lot of people were going to Bellator and they were saying, they're just taking the money, and they were kind of going nowhere. Right? That's not the case here. Everyone's going somewhere in the PFL. Even if you're in a showcase fight, you're probably going into a tournament next year, or that's the hope at least anyway. So I think it's a massive, massive, massive boost for European MMA, for fighters and all of that. For judges and refs as well. I know there was some, the likes of Derek Hickey, an Irish ref and judge. He got a few spots in this, and it's great to see the likes of, Daniel Mulvaheady and Rich Mitchell and Ben Cartledge and David Leatherby and Darren Ransom and others getting their opportunities here as well. But, I think it's huge. Right. So that's one side of it. That was a very long-winded side one. The other side of it is, do you put, and maybe some of these examples now will go to the global, but bear with me for a second. Do you put Brett Johns into the PFL Europe? Do you put James Gallagher into the PFL Europe tournament? Do you put Tom Breeze? Do you put Cedric Doumbé? Do you put Simeon Powell back in there? Do you put maybe a couple of... I know the champions will be moving on, but let's say, do you put Franz Malambo back in it? Is that what you do? Do you make it like an all-star PFL European tournament? Because that changes what we have then, I think. That changes it a little bit. And I'm not sure they should or want to change it. I'm very interested to see what next year's roster will look like. Honestly, I'm excited either way. If they do either of those 2 things, I'm very excited. But maybe there's a case for 2 PFL Europes. Maybe there's a case for the PFL Europe and the PFL Europe Challenger Series, maybe, where we get even let's say if it's 4 fighters, you get 4 bantamweights and they fight in the semi-final, then they fight in the final, and next year they're in PFL Europe. If they win that, they're in PFL Global. Maybe that would be kind of cool as well. And then you can have those guys maybe the 5-0, 6-0. And then you have, maybe your Doumbés, maybe your Brett Johnses, maybe your James Gallagher's, another like that, your Kieran Clarks, your Nathan Kellys, your Dara Kellys, and fighters like that, Wesley Maya, going into tournaments. That would be so interesting. But I'll tell you what, I want to end all these podcasts by looking ahead to the future and seeing what levels of excitement I have for the future, and it's massive levels of excitement for PFL Europe. Really is. And you know what? I was really unsure about PFL Europe. As I said earlier on, I was thinking, is this just going to be, is it just going to be another promotion and all the fighters will kind of be broken up? But it's not. It's not that at all. It's 3 fun matchups in a year for these fighters. And you know what as well? Sometimes it's hard for the fighters to get 3 fights, to get 3 matchups, to get 3 signed on the dotted line contracts with guaranteed money. Very hard. Get experience like that. And it's brilliant that PFL are providing that as well. So I am a triple thumbs up, a double thumbs up for PFL Europe. I really enjoyed it. And what I'm going to do now as well is I'm going to name my PFL Europe fighter of the year. I'm going to do this for Bellator, UFC, PFL, but for PFL Europe as well, and one championship, or maybe whoever else I do. The fighter for me, there's no doubt about it, the standout fighter for me this year is Khurshid Kakarov. He is my PFL fighter of the year. Honestly, Kazuba, Dacheva, and Indoy, all very close. I probably have Dacheva close second, not based on the wins or anything like that, although they were very good, but based on the star power, based on the future potential. If it was based on future potential, she'd be number 1, to be honest. But what Khurshid Kakarov did this year, the level he got coming back against Franz, who was winning that fight, was fantastic. So he is my PFL Europe Sheehan Shaw fighter of the year, Khurshid Kakarov. Congratulations to him. And congratulations to PFL as well for putting on a wonderful tournament this year. All right, I will leave it there. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. And can't wait for next year in PFL Europe. I'll leave it there. My name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.